Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum.
I'm Allie.
And I'm Gabby. And we're real-life sober BFFs exploring spirituality,
Social issues,
all things sobriety,
and staying present in a world full of distractions.
Come join us on this journey.
We've been waiting for you.
I want to apologize in advance for some technical difficulties. You may hear some cutting out with the recording on my end. Coming at you in Vietnam when I'm recording, so I do apologize, but please continue to listen and enjoy the content. So welcome everyone. This is one episode in a series about specifically focusing on people of color and how our experience is in the wellness and spiritual world. Today we're going to be focusing on healing spaces, and we have joining us Sharlene Paul. She has a background in psych and social work, is also a yoga teacher, trauma-informed yoga, works with kids and teens, background in Thai body work, and has started Afro Flow Yoga. Hello, Sharlene.
Hello.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm 30 years old. I just actually celebrated my birthday this past Wednesday. So it's an interesting time in my life. I found yoga. Thank you. I found yoga back in 2014, just randomly going to my local gym. And I really didn't come back to yoga until 2018 when I went through a breakup. And it really just like made me, when women break up with someone, they just want to get back to themselves and really do something that they want to do for themselves. So that's kind of like how I found yoga is. I just wanted to connect with my mind, body, and spirit on a personal level. And I fell in love with it. So I started to take a look at my community, and I realized that we don't have any centers or any yoga studios in my actual city. So, and especially not led by a person of color. So then that motivated me to just become an instructor so that at least I can be the change that I wish to see and get the process rolling. Aside from yoga, I work in corrections, which is very interesting. Get a lot of eyebrows raising as soon as you hear that, a young female of color working in the prison system. So I've been doing that for almost going on 8 years now. So that's another dynamic about me as well.
Awesome and very interesting. I'm really excited to hear your perspective, especially working in the correctional system, how that has shaped your perspective when it comes to healing spaces in particular. So also joining us today, we have Kimrah Minuty. She is the CEO of Silver Lining Spirals Visual Arts and the author of Lighten Up Phoenix, Keep Rising. Hello, Kimrah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Can you share a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, so I wrote a book called Lighten Up Phoenix, Keep Rising, and it's a poetry and art book, and I wrote it when I was on disability because part of my spiritual awakening was to go through a series of intense experiences that reshaped my life, and part of that was 2 years on disability, in which time I was able to produce my book. And when I got kicked off disability, I published the book, I started my company, and I got back up on my feet. And so that's why the book was called Lighten Up Phoenix, Keep Rising, because no matter what happens, you got to like get up and figure out how to make it work. And so my work now is to spread motivation to people of color and just anyone in general who has depression, anxiety issues, and who feels like they don't have a gift to give to the world. And I'm here to tell you that's not the case.
Awesome. Very, very awesome. And I'm really excited to hear your perspective as well, especially since you've gone through some of those more difficult challenges. And then finally today we have joining us Lauren Danielle. She is the owner of Soul Divine Wellness and Creations. And I really want you to talk about Beads of Love Soiree.
So I am Lauren Danielle, a Soul Divine, and I am 33 years old, and I'm located in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And I specialize in holistic self-care, so caring for yourself holistically, mind, body, spirit. So I specialize in yoga, detox therapy, goddess feminine health care, Reiki, and vibrational sound therapy, which is my favorite therapy service to offer. And I am passionate about the elevation of our community. So, with along with my holistic therapies, I also make custom creations that are catered to elevating the mind, body, and spirit. So I make waist beads, I do copper jewelry, I also make smudge sticks, and I'm an herbal pad distributor. And basically, Atlanta Bees of Love Soiree is an event that I'm hosting in June 20, June June 2020. So it's going to be basically an event for Black women and Black men to come together in one space in order for us to have conversation, to dissect what are the barriers that's causing us to grow, build, and heal together. And it's also going to be a celebration of Juneteenth, because it falls on that weekend. It's going to be networking, just all around. Oh, and it's going to be speed dating too for those that are single, but it's going to be an awesome event. So really excited about it. So thank you for allowing me to share that space. Thank you.
Yes, that's beautiful. I love that you're creating that sense of community and bringing people together. So before we actually get started with the discussion, I do want to just give a disclaimer that we are going to be talking about some emotional topics and subject matter that might be sensitive for some people. So if that's something that you're not prepared to dive into right now, then you might want to listen at a later time. So we will go ahead and get started. And I'm going to pose the question to the group, and then I'll just ask that we kind of go around and start the discussion. So the first question that I want to ask is, when it comes to healing the body, mind, and spirit through holistic methods like the Reiki, acupuncture, energy work, and other alternative healing modalities, how important do you feel it is to receive these therapies from a person of color, and then not just a person of color, but specifically a Black person?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I received Reiki from a person who was not Black. And in fact, I've never even met the person that I received Reiki from, and she lives in Italy. The most life-changing Reiki sessions I've ever had in my life, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I hadn't gone to her. So for me, I can't say that it mattered at all that she wasn't Black, because our souls connected, and that was critical for me. Otherwise, I would not have gotten on my pathway to be able to share my story with people and go, yeah, color helps if you need to bridge that gap to get something done, but at the end of the day, energy is energy. And she lives in Italy, I live in Florida. I wouldn't have gotten my book published. I wouldn't have learned the law of attraction. Her name is Melissa Hay too, by the way, guys. She's a phenomenal Reiki healer. I learned Reiki levels 1 and 2 from her also, which helped in my healing process. So for me, I don't think it matters, but if it's something that bothers you, you should definitely go to someone that you're comfortable with. You know, Melissa just happened to put out a call at the time that I needed to receive one, and we intersected, and that's what mattered for me.
Well, I kind of agree with Kimrah that I don't think it matters. I think what matters most is if you feel connected to that person, like just listening to your internal sense, like, do I feel comfortable? Do I feel like this person, whatever the energy may be, like just being comfortable with that energy. But I also think it could be beneficial to see your reflection, knowing that our ancestors are tapped in, and we're tapped in and attuned to these energy work. And so being able to make that connection that this is our work, being able to see someone that looks like you, that I think that will be very beneficial. But I mean, just like therapy, I know when I was in therapy, like I wanted to find somebody that looked like me to be my reflection and to give me a sense that you know what I'm going through, it kind of vibe. So that's just my spin on it.
Yes.
And I also wanted to chime in. My first experience with Reiki actually was by a Black woman. And I was very interested in going to that class because I was holding off on getting Reiki sessions prior to. And so when I saw her advertisement for her event, I went, and it was a phenomenal experience. It was all women of color that was also getting it, a couple of other people who never had Reiki done before. And since then, I've had Reiki done by a white person, and I didn't feel anything at all. It was actually during a yoga class, like she added it on like while we're in our postures, like restorative yoga. But then again, I also then had Reiki done again, and it was by a different Black woman. And I really didn't feel a connection there either. So I agree with Kimrah about it's an energy thing. It's not a race thing. It's good if you feel uncomfortable around white people in white spaces. But definitely you have to discern the difference between someone who's just white and someone who's white with ill intention. So it could be a Black person, it could be a white person. I personally live in Massachusetts where it's predominantly white, so I'm often in white spaces. It's nice to feel the differences instead of just being biased, thinking that a Black person is inherently better than a white person to get any kind of services from.
Yes, great perspectives. For me, all of my Reiki experiences have been with people of color, but they have not been Black women, they've all been women. I received Reiki I was actually attuned by a Brazilian woman, and then my typical Reiki provider is Puerto Rican and some other mix of things. But I do agree that their energy is what created the connection between us. I didn't seek out their services because they, looked more like me or whatever. It was definitely a vibe that drew me to them to receive those services. But I do think representation is so important. And if you are able to see people that are offering these services, and that gets more people to start, going and trying these alternative healing modalities and trying energy work and trying these different services, I think it's a really beautiful thing if it's opening that to the community, and people who might not be as trusting in white spaces have the opportunity to still receive the healing from these services.
Wanted to say that I feel part of our purpose, maybe, and I know we have that question later on, but part of our purpose is to be a representation for people of color. Like, so for me, it doesn't matter who I got my Reiki from initially. What matters for me is that I learned Reiki levels 1 and 2, and I'm going to get my Reiki practitioner later on, so that I can then be the representation of a person of color who does energy work, who does healing work, who is in a spiritual space, so that I can represent that differently for the upcoming generations, because I know that coming up, that's not what was represented to me. This was called witchery and demonry and, that kind of stuff. And it's all just energy, so we could just move past that. So I feel it's kind of important, even though we don't go into the spaces as being people of color, but once you have taken the knowledge to represent it as best you can with the full heritage that you have. That's all.
Absolutely. I want to know what healing looks like for you, and then just to kind of expand that a little bit into your individual community, like in Florida or Georgia or Massachusetts. What does healing look like in your community, and what unique challenges in your region are faced in this, in your smaller subsection of overall Blackness in America?
Okay, so it's funny you mentioned this. My other side hustle in life is that I also have fun, make money, and make a difference. I work as a life insurance agent here in Florida. So I sell health, life, and annuities. And the reason I went down that track instead of getting something more spiritually mainstream was because I realized people who are hungry can't really work on their trauma too great. And when you're financially unstable, it's really hard to do healing. And when you're trying to figure out how to deal with your kids and you have no support and you have no way to pay for babysitting, it's hard to find out what's really eating you on the inside. And so I found a vehicle that I could like help people get the opportunity to stabilize themselves financially or add more income to their already decent job or whatever the case may be, because once you were less uncomfortable in a physical sense, then you could fall back and focus on a spiritual sense. And so in Florida, for me, I've noticed that that's like the primary goal, because the wage rate is really low here, and it's a right to work state. They can fire you at any moment. And it's also a no fault state. So whenever you get into car accidents, like nobody's at fault. So you can't get really good care if you don't have the right policies. And so a lot of these things seem to stack up against people of color. And so they don't get quality healing, quality health. They don't have access to chiropractic, acupuncture, all the things that would make you less reliant on modern medicine and more able to transition into a more spiritual awakened space. So it's kind of rough. And so I feel that a lot of people find the internet in my community as a way to reach out and find their space. There's not a yoga studio within 30 to 45 minutes of where I am. Easy to say, 30. And if there, I mean, I can go to LA Fitness for $40 a month and find yoga maybe twice a week or something like that. Like it'll be like, but there's not a real yoga studio. And those make a difference. Fair enough.
So in South Carolina, I'm originally from South Carolina, and in South Carolina, people aren't as easily open to healing. I mean, because healing work is very deep, and a lot of us, a lot of times, aren't ready to face what we need healing from. So when I just recently moved back home for a year, and while I was there, I definitely saw that firsthand, that people would rather, you know, spend money on paying for a service that can help them to, you know, elevate them mentally, physically, and spiritually. So it was a struggle to get people to attend yoga classes. It's a struggle for people to eat right, because in the South, you know, in the low country of South Carolina, we're known for eating seafood. So like everybody's used to eating a certain way. So changing the diet was a struggle as well. So again, I just think in my region, like there is more of a once they're ready to heal, then that's when they will come to healing. And you know, my prayer is that people will come to that realization before, you know, healthcare comes into play. Like they will need physical help. So not physical help, excuse me, medical attention. So that's the space of South Carolina in my experience with healing.
I would just add, for where I live up north, healing for me personally was taking a stand against the stereotype, the overall narrative. So growing up, I actually saw like my older siblings, my older sister, my older brother in and out of prison my whole life. So it just really, you have two choices. You can follow in their footsteps, or you can decide to do something different. It always was something on my mind that I was curious about, like, why is it that as soon as they get out of prison, they're right back? Why can't they keep a job? What kind of services are actually available to them? And so I found myself eventually in the prison system, kind of like by divine intervention, because ultimately I went to school for psychology and social work, but I ended up not being able to solidify any employment right after graduation. So I ended up getting an internship, and it happened to be in a prison. And it was eye-opening to see that we have this strained relationship with law enforcement and people of color. It's definitely, you feel like you're either a sellout or you're working for the man or you're going against your community, when in reality, if we don't have any people of color that work in the system, exactly what kind of care do you expect them to have in there? It's just pretty much them fending for themselves. So healing for me was really going against just the hearsay and the rumors and what people think, and actually getting to the source root of what exactly is going on, and being an eyewitness to these things, and then being that person that can bring those services back to my community. So if we just sit around and we just complain about what's going on and no one has the insider view, it's basic politics. It's really who you know instead of what you know. And you have to start to make a stand for yourself and start to get in these spaces that are not typically Black. And you'll start to slowly begin to change the narrative of what is healing and why we have these cycles and systems in place.
So for me, I'm from St. Louis. So I was living there during all of the Mike Brown stuff. I witnessed all of that firsthand. And St. Louis is a very unique kind of city. I've never experienced the type of segregation and separation and fear that exists in St. Louis. And I've been all over the country, all over the world. Healing is needed greatly in St. Louis. And it's something that for a long time, all I wanted to do was get out of St. Louis because it felt like a vortex and a black cloud. And now I feel almost called to be like a missionary type person in St. Louis and bring just the gifts that I have, and now the knowledge that I have from like studying yoga and studying Reiki and different alternative healing modalities, and bring that back to the community to start offering just the opportunities and the spaces for people to come and be able to get healing. And there are some really awesome yoga communities that are popping up in St. Louis and kind of coming together. And there's different services that are popping up in St. Louis. I think as a result of everything that happened a few years ago, it kind of sparked a fire within the community to be like, hey, we need to do something because whatever is going on right now is not working and things are not good. So yeah, I like to hear that. I think that we're all kind of in our different communities moving towards this space where we're either online, being able to build those connections online, or actually be in the community and create these spaces for people to come and find a place where they can get the healing that they're seeking when they're ready to come to that. I'm really curious if you feel there are any specific therapies that people of color can use to their advantage to work through the generational trauma and community wounds and things that we're carrying in our DNA that have been passed down through the generations.
I'll chime in on that. Definitely there's a lot of different things that you have to include in order to undo a lot of generational ties and things like that. I would say the first one is talking about it with community. I think we, like our parents and our parents' parents, just dealt with it. And starting that dialogue allows us to see each other, see ourselves in each other, and to see that we're not alone, and to waken up, open up that throat chakra and just open up these gateways in our bodies that we held trauma and stress. And that's the first thing, that the most basic thing we can do is gather together in community and start talking about these things. Another thing that I believe is very useful is creative arts. Definitely being expressive. Our ancestors are people that showed their emotions through dance, through song, through writing, through speaking. All kinds of those things are there. That was the most basic therapy. And now we're just realizing that instead of paying for all these expensive treatments and medicines and things like that, the most basic things we need is movement, is an ability to open up our expressive side. So using the arts and those kind of methods. Definitely taking a look at your family lineage and seeing where there was trauma, seeing where there was brokenness, and stating those things, but also looking to correct or move forward from those things. So if you have a history of financial issues in your family, or you have a history of rape and incest or anything like that, these are things that we not only have to state, but we also have to say, okay, we're going to make an effort to undo these going forward, which leads me to the next thing, which is paving the way for the generation behind us. So we can say grandma was alcoholic, or we can say our cousin was in and out of prison, was very violent. We know this now. We stated it. We've expressed it. But now let's see how we can improve upon these things. How can we stay more in contact with each other? How can we pave the way for the generation coming behind us? And it's all one big cycle. So I think it's a whole community. It takes a village, definitely, to undo some generational, I wouldn't say curses, I would just say generational ties and generational emotions and trauma and baggage. But it's definitely, it's not a one-stop solution. It's definitely a cycle of things that come together to make it go in the right path.
Yeah, I agree completely with all of that. For me personally, it's a lot of things. It's crystals, it's sound therapy. Sound therapy is like really important for me. I listened to 528 hertz DNA music for about 3.5 years before I was able to really shake myself into a more progressive awareness of what I needed to do to fix my trauma. And then part of that had to do with using crystals a lot. I resonate a lot with crystals, and they help me with my healing. The Reiki, of course, was super important. Yoga was super important. A lot of moving meditation. I'm an artist, so needless to say, I write poetry, I paint, I draw, I sing. I had to use all of those things to get through healing generational trauma. I've got a history with rape and sexual abuse and really bad self-worth issues, and I came a long way through that. That caused a lot of my bipolar and depression problems. And so when I look out into the community, that's what I see. I see a lot of low self-worth that has been ingrained in us through trauma, through multi-generations. And so what I try to do is just unearth that. And that looks like a lot of different things. Like we're saying, it's a lot of different, you have to have a mixed bag of tricks to really move forward. And also you have to have the focused intent, like Sharlene said, to just know that, yeah, that happened in the past. I'm the bridge that breaks it. And then going forward, my child or my children's children, we're not moving this forward with our eggs, because we hold that power as women in our DNA to hold the true change of the DNA by making sure that the next set of children aren't born with the trauma embedded in their eggs. And so for me, it was really important to just be like, this stops now. You don't have to be raped. You need to have these viewpoints. You need to see what the triggers are. And you feeling like you have low self-worth, let's work on that now. Let's not wait till you're 20 and you're attracting craziness. Let's learn to be more emotionally stable. Let's talk about why we're not emotionally stable. Conversation is super important. I think that's the first part. Let's stop lying about it. I'm not crazy. I have issues and I'm sad and no one's talked to me and no one knew. And these are all the root of the problems. Labeling it is not the problem. We don't want to label it. We want to find out what happened. Let's talk about it so we can fix it. And I think if we can just start with that, that's half the battle.
We definitely need to have the conversation. I feel like, we're still in a time where we have family secrets. So we need to create that safe space where we can share what has happened to us, and have that support from family and the trust as well, because it's common that when someone expresses that this happened to me when I was so and so, then it's that person becomes the liar per se. So just shifting that, and then just recognizing that some of the things that do pass down are not ours, and we just have to release that being put on us. I know the popular people like to say all the time, oh, it runs in my family. And just recently I started shifting that. I'm like, yeah, it maybe then, but it stops here. Like, not claiming things that happen in our family that's going to happen to us too. And I would say that Reiki definitely would be a therapy, because we bury these things deep in our subconscious, the trauma that happens to us. Reiki would be beneficial to help to open up those areas. And also vibrational sound therapy. I know a lot of people aren't familiar with vibrational sound therapy. So basically with the use of copper vibrational sound bowls, they go on the body, and the sounds and the vibrations for the bowls activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our relaxation response. And in that session, it can be a breakthrough for someone to release. So I always, anytime I do a session with someone, I let them set an intention before we begin. So as those vibrations or sounds are penetrating the body, changing the cellular structure of the body, we're shifting those generational traumas as well. So those are just two that I think are really good. And what the other ladies mentioned, sound therapy, yoga, dance therapy is awesome as well. So yeah.
Yoga for me was my breakthrough into a whole world of relief and healing, and introduced me to the people that introduced me to Reiki and sound therapies and all of those things. So I always joke and I'm like, have you heard of our Lord and Savior yoga? Just because that was my introduction into just this whole new world of evolving myself and opening up myself and being able to come back to myself and release the things that I was carrying that I don't want to pass on to next generations. So yes, I think it's so important and so strong, and taking the stand to say, hey, like maybe that was our soul's choice for choosing these bodies, was to be the ones to stand and say, hey, this is not going to continue with me. I'm not passing this on. And the next generations won't have to heal from the same trauma that I'm experiencing right now in this lifetime. My next question is, and this kind of ties into another podcast episode that is specifically focused on whiteness in wellness spaces and the lack of representation and kind of inclusivity. What do you see, and this might also kind of ties into another episode about us taking on these bodies and these generational traumas and things on our spiritual path. There's a lot of distrust in the Black community for white people, and that is something that we carry in our DNA. That is something that's been passed down through the generations. What do you see as a timeline for forgiveness and healing from a generational perspective, for the community to start trusting the souls that have found their way into white bodies today, and these souls that are taking up spaces in the healing and wellness communities?
I'll jump in. I love this question, so thank you for that. I would love to believe that, we've come a long way and that white people are actually very understanding. And for the most part, yes, I have met that. But this question in particular reminds me of when I was in my yoga teacher training program and I was the only person of color. And oftentimes I was faced by this one particular man in particular who just could not understand why there was anything Black only. he just was very appalled by it, very like offended. And I remember in particular one time I explained to the group that we always chime in on like how our weekend was, what we did. And I said, yeah, I just came from this retreat. It was a women of color only retreat. And that just like rubbed him the wrong way. But then the rest of the group asked, like, where'd you find this retreat? Or where do you find any of your retreats? I said, oh, I'm part of this yoga page on Facebook called Black Girl Yoga. And he was just like, Black Girl Yoga? Like there's an actual page just for Black girls doing yoga? It just was like, there's not an understanding still to this day as to why these spaces need to happen. And I felt as though that weekend was the first time that I could actually let my guard down, that I could feel seen, because I'm surrounded by a lot of people people of color in the community who are still very much like heavily Christian, heavily like traditional, and to them any of the stuff that I'm doing is like demonic. I've been told it's demonic. I've told it's bad, it's not of God. And it just makes you feel very, very much alone. So if my own community of color doesn't accept what I do, and then white people don't understand why we have to have anything that's Black only, it was just like frustrating to hear that response. It's like, I'm so thankful for other healing modalities and people of color who are taking up a stand and saying, you know what, I don't want to just do what my family wants me to do. I want to actually explore what I believe and what actually resonates with me. And so that weekend that I went to, I saw hundreds of Black people from all across the United States that are actually in this space with me. So however he felt about it, it just was a nice realization, a nice reality check for me that we still have so much further to go, because the white people that are being born now into this realm in this day and age, just they have this idea that happened years ago. Slavery has been done. The slavery has been over. So why the separation? Why the segregation? So we still have some ways to go. We definitely have to undo this narrative that, you know, it's not always about you, is what I really want to say. It's like sometimes it doesn't have anything to do, anything that's pro-Black doesn't mean anti-white. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you. And that's, I think, new for a lot of white people. Everything is so used to being about them. If it's pro-Black, then it must be because you hate white people. No, not the case at all. There's just some things that I can connect with other Black women about that you'll never understand. There's certain situations that you'll never be put in. And it's a constant fight. It's a constant battle. We are making progress, but there's this absenteeism of like understanding why now we have to have this separation.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And wow, you just covered so many different things that I'm like, where do I start? So one of the things that I find in health and wellness with African American women is, for instance, just the conversation on reproduction alone leaves a lot to be desired in terms of whiteness and wellness, because I had the most interesting conversation in a Haitian Ladies Network group that I'm part of, because I'm Haitian, on fibroids. Fibroids, okay? And they're like, why are we still having this discussion? Well, because over 103 comments on this one page was about surgery. We can't fix fibroids or endometriosis or cysts with anything but surgery. Why? Because it's dismissed as being something that all Black women get, and so what, and we'll just do hysterectomies. So you don't think that's causing like a generational trauma to our wombs, to our uteruses? Like, and it's easily dismissed. It's dismissed by a lot of people because it's just, oh, Black women, you fall into that category, and so you're just going to suck it up, and so we're just going to chop your uterus off, and that's okay. That's not okay. It's not okay. If we're going to have the conversations about healing generational trauma, then we need to look at the way we are being segregated in our healthcare. Not because that white people hate us, but because we're just not being addressed. It's not that it's just women of color, it's women in general. Like, periods aren't a conversation topic. Okay, we all have them. 50% of the planet. Hello. We're not crazy because of hormones. Like, these are conversations that are only just now coming to the forefront as women, period, and then women of color, and then, add the spiritual aspects to it. Like, so just a rabbit hole of thought patterns on that situation where wellness and whiteness do kind of become problematic in a more scientific state. Then there's the whole added conversation of, okay, now I'm not a Christian, or I believe in God, but I don't believe in this religious situation. And so now, am I free to go and experience these alternative holistic thought patterns that could keep me away from, say, surgery or more medications, or just understanding that we can fix our bodies with diet and exercise and energy and connection and sunlight. And can we have these conversations, Black people, white people, brown people, people who bleed? Like, if I punch you in the stomach, will it hurt? Yeah. That doesn't matter on your color, So, I don't know. I think that maybe this generation is starting to get there. For instance, my daughter is 12. She doesn't see color at all. I notice the younger they are, they don't see it, and that's great. But those of us who are like transitional generations, I'm 38. I find myself to be a sandwich generation before the internet, but I'm tech savvy enough to be on Zoom. That puts me in a weird place when it comes to who I am. There weren't dark faces on the TV when I grew up. We didn't have hopes and dreams of that. I wasn't cool to be Haitian till I was like 17, 16, because before that I just had to be Black, because there's like a hierarchy in our own colorism. That's a whole other problem. I didn't have dark-skinned friends because they hated me for being light-skinned. I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot that we have to work on, so I can't see it being in one generation. It could be 2 or 3 generations. I know we're making progress, but there's a lot of conversations to be had.
And I definitely will just agree with what both of you ladies said. I just think it's all about us creating, as wellness practitioners, us creating that space to share this knowledge, because our women, Black women, once we're experiencing all of these womb conditions, when we go to the doctor and they say, oh, there's nothing left we can do, we have to take your womb, like, it's almost like we don't even know there's other options. So just being able to hold space and let women of color know we do have other options, and then also recognizing the spiritual aspects of why we experience all of these ailments and conditions, because of unresolved trauma as well. So just creating a safe space where we become more knowledgeable, I think, is really important for this generation.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm not sure that I even have anything to add there. Very powerful statements. So to just move into the next topic and continue with the whiteness and wellness, and just I want to share that the other half of this podcast is my best friend, and she's a white woman and a white ally. And when we were having discussions about this podcast, she actually said, hey, I'm going to step back and let you ladies have this platform and this space, and I'm just going to use my voice to elevate yours and make sure that you guys are able to have a conversation without any sense of feeling like it's being hijacked or anything like that. And I love her for that. That's why she's my best friend. But I wanted to ask you and present the question, what would you like to see from white allies and other cultures that might look down on brown bodies, so that it can contribute to an aid in this healing and this creating real oneness and dismantling these systems of oppression and these systems that create the distrust in our communities that cause this separation and the need for spaces for people of color?
Well, my friend just did this the other day. I have several white best friends I grew up with because it turns out that I'm the token black friend. I like we had a whole set of people and like I was the one that broke the color barrier and I'm like the token black friend, so I went over to these people's houses and my friend, I hadn't seen her in like 8 years. She came to see me and she's like, "Hey, my mom's gonna call you because possibly she wants to apologize for her sort of racist viewpoints." And I was like, "I love your mom, no big deal." But she was like, "No, I think that in this day and age, it's time for me to stand up for what I believe in, and it's to be not quiet as a white ally and to not sit back when people who are older than me who don't know better come out of their mouths saying crazy things that are hurtful to people I love because I'm not racist." And I was like, whoa, that's a big statement. And so I feel that perhaps that's what our white allies are here to do at this point in time, is to not co-sign the previous racism, to just call out their older parents or more set in stone ways type individuals and be like, "Hey, I know that you thought this was okay when we were growing up, but this is a new time span and that is not okay. And yes, you don't mean it, but it's still hurtful. And so if you could please be mindful in public, or wherever you are where you're going to be affecting others who could be harmed by your old school mentality, could we just rein it in?" And that was one of the most powerful conversations I've had in a long time, an unexpected one, and right in time for this podcast.
I also think that just being able to allow us to have those private healing retreats that we need, and not feeling a certain way, because again, that's just something that they wouldn't understand. So just being able to, for us to be able to come together in one space without backlash or whatever, and just asking, what do you need as well, at the same time. So what do you need? How can we support? I think that was needed at this time.
I agree with both ladies. Definitely taking a stand when you see something isn't right or you hear something isn't right and asking what we need, but also doing some of their own research. It's 2020 now, and I remember coming across a quote, and it was just you have all the information at your disposal. So instead of subjugating Black people to be the representative for all of Black people, answering your questions and things of that nature, do some of your own research and then be an ally to Black people as well. So pretty much taking a stand and saying, you know what, I don't know what it's like to be XYZ. I don't know how that feels. Instead of being defensive or always trying to make up excuses, just say, I don't know, and I'm curious and I want to learn more. And then once you have that knowledge, you can share that knowledge, but not always relying on someone of color to be that voice for you. So I think that's very important. It's like you know that there's information out there. There's resources out there, and if you don't know, then you can reach out to some people. But every single time you meet someone that you disagree with, that's not an invitation to put them on a pedestal to be a representative for everyone in the room or a whole generation, a whole race. So coming together in partnerships definitely help. It doesn't always have to be Black only space or white only space. You can say, you know what, I am in a position where I'm privileged enough to be in this space or have this studio or have this. Why not bring some more people on that don't have that access, that don't have that privilege, just for the sake of lifting up everyone? You want to be the change that you see. You want more people of color to come to your studio. You want more people of color to work for you. Be that gap and reach out to those communities and say, I have space for you. Come on and join me. And, I want to learn from you. So I think oftentimes they're waiting for someone else to come in and say, hey, I have this token Black instructor, do you want them? Instead of just saying, you know what, I'm going to go to the hood and take a class and see what they do out there. And why is it that I can't get more students of color, and learn from that. You know, you almost have to do a role reversal, and you have to be the minority in a sense. What is it like for you to be the only white person in the room when everyone else is Black? And how does that feel? How does that feel on a visceral level for you? And take that as your own personal lived experience. And then you can come back to your community and say, you know, this is how I got to this point of being where I am, and I understand how I got here and what we can do to improve, but also giving that space for other people to also then tell their stories.
Yes, I love all of that. And actually, to go back to putting the onus on people of color to do the work for someone else, that's not true allyship. When someone says, hey, I don't understand what's going on, and then expects you to do all of the emotional labor to explain to them why something is harmful, or why, you know, Black spaces are needed, or whatever. You know, let's just talk about Black fraternities, why they even exist. Well, you can go Google why they got started. You know, there's a reason behind that, because Black bodies weren't invited into white spaces at that time. So someone said to me, hey, like, it's not your job to sit down with all of these people and explain all of this to them. They have the resources at their fingertips to go and do this work. And that was really eye-opening for me, because I also, in my community for a long time growing up, I was the Black friend. I was the friend that people would use to be like, I'm not a racist, I had this friend. So I think that sometimes too, if we're in those situations, we take on that role of being the person to explain things, or feel like we have to represent the entire Black community, and that's not our job. People have the access and resources to go and get those things themselves without expecting Black bodies to do that emotional labor. So we made it through all the questions, and I thank you ladies so much for your time and your insight and your perspective. Before we close here, I just wanted to ask if anyone wanted to add anything additional to this conversation, just on any of these topics, or something else that might have come in and you feel led to share with us.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to add, but I just want to say thank you, and I feel like this is a stepping stone to, you know, changing some things for the Black community. So I just want to say give thanks for you facilitating this conversation.
I was going to say something similar. I wanted to just say that whenever we gather in spaces like this, it's always a powerful connection. I'm thankful to be a part of that, and to have good conversations about how we can elevate all of our personal DNA and global DNA on a more energetic level. I know that because we spoke about these topics, that solutions are being brewed and pulled into existence, and they may not happen through us, but they will come through us to others, and we will see them in fruition. And that's one of the most important things. My friend Melissa, my life coach, she said this morning, she said, the time is done for us to have these silent thoughts. It's time for us to open our mouths and speak. Sharlene, you said the same thing about opening our throat chakras. I've got my blue kyanite with me, because that's how I make sure that we are on that throat chakra, you know. And so I'm really thankful to be a part of this panel with you ladies. If anybody is interested in finding some financial freedom through insurance, holler at me. I got a job for you. Thank you so much for having me on here. I would love to do this again.
So they pretty much summed up how I feel. I love when Black women can get together and just have conversation, have meaningful conversation about things that are considered unorthodox. But really, I believe it's a beautiful time to be alive. I believe in that. I believe that there's a lot of things set in motion, and things that are changing, and they, as in white people, might look at it as radical, but I feel like it's liberating instead of radical. So conversations like this on a wider scale, being a podcast so it can reach more people, is the change that we need to see, and we need more of this. So thank you for hosting this podcast. Thank you. And thank you for having me on it.
Yes, thank you again to all the ladies. And for the listeners, if you'd like to follow anyone, again, everything will be listed in the show notes. If you don't feel like going to the website, you can follow Sharlene on Instagram at Mocha Wellness. You can find Kimrah at Off Duty with Minuty. Minuty is spelled Minuty. And Lauren Danielle can be found at Soul Divine Vibes. Thank you so much for listening, and feel free to share this with your communities, get people to listen, to have these conversations, and let me know how your conversations go if this starts something for you. I would love to hear it. You can find us at MySoberBFF on Instagram, and the website is mysoberbff.com. Bye.
Thank you.
Bum bum ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum